We've got a lot to cover tonight. As you know, this is called Atheism and Theism, a dialogue about building bridges, right? So we're going to do a lot of exploring tonight. We're not going to do any badgering or bantering. We seek to employ civil discourse. I like that, civil discourse. Well, we'll save the best for last. And the best is you folks. This isn't going to be just a discussion among these two or between these two with me. It's going to be a discussion among everybody in the audience. So let's start with the term theism. It is derived from the Greek theos, meaning God, coined in the 17th century. Theism, in the broad sense, is the belief in at least one deity. In a more specific sense, theism refers to the doctrine concerning the nature of God and God's relationship to the universe. Theism, in this specific sense, conceives of a God as a personal and active God in the governance and organization of world affairs and the universe. The use of the word theism as indicating a particular doctrine of monotheism arose in the wake of the scientific revolution of the 17th century to contrast with the emerging deism, which contended that a God, though transcendent and supreme, did not intervene in the natural world and could be known rationally, but not through personal revelation. That's essentially theism. Now, the negation, rejection, or absence of theism is known as atheism. Okay? So I'm going to start with that premise, and I want to ask our two esteemed guests. First, do you believe in God? And can you justify your belief as true? Start with the Reverend Parrott.
Now you've given us a wonderfully brief compendium of millennium of interpretations of God. Yes, I believe in God. I believe that we are hardwired to believe in a spirit, to experience a spirit in our experience. What we do with that is that we create religions and we create theology. In my view, both of those are human constructions. Our religions and our theology. And so they can be criticized, deconstructed in any way that we like because they are human constructions. But I believe that in the world as we experience it, we experience the reality of spirit, what can only be called spirit as far as I'm concerned, something that it has been called transcendence, something that might be called divine. It is something that cannot be proven. I personally have long ago given up the idea that I could persuade somebody rationally that there is a God that they must believe in. But I continue to believe and experience the reality of what I call transcendence or divine or spirit all around me in life as I experience it. I'll turn it over to you now.
Well, let me ask, before you go, can you justify your belief as true, or do you separate the truth from a belief?
I don't understand your word justify. Is that the same as kind of proving it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you accept your belief as true. Is that fair?
I experience it.
Okay, that's fair. Earl, do you believe in God, and can you justify your belief as true?
No and no.
All right, let me ask
But
you.
wait a minute, I have a question for Harry.
Let me ask this a different way. Does God exist? Harry?
The reality that I experience and that I think religions have responded to and tried to understand is the reality of spirit, transcendence, the divine, or God. God is the word God is a human construction. That is the thing that I think humans have experienced throughout our time on this earth. And as we struggle to make sense of it, and to explain it, and to build institutions to preserve it and bring it to our consciousness, all of these are, as I said before, all of these are human constructions.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right. Earl, is it true we are all born atheists?
I think so, yeah, I do. And the reason why I was kind of trying to be funny on the answer to the first question, the first two questions, no and no, is because as an atheist, I shouldn't have to justify having an absence in a theistic belief. So I shouldn't have to get up here and go on and on and on about how or why I don't have this belief. Okay, is that fair? Did you repeat that question that you just asked?
Is it true that we're all born atheists? Let's hear Harry answer that.
Okay, I just answered it, yes, I think we are.
No, I would say just the opposite, that I think you cannot, a child is a believer. A child is a believer in something that is very traditional in human life for as long as there has been human life. And those of you, I think, who have had children and who have experienced the joy, the hope, the humor that children have, and the questions that they ask, well, my view is that a child is born full of the kind of spirit that I've talked about. And it amazes me, I guess, as I have come to know a number of atheists through my lifetime, that although they are atheists, they are obsessed. They are obsessed with religion. And I keep asking myself, why that is.
Well, ask me.
Go to it, Earl.
Okay, ask me. But hold me to that, because you just said that children are believers. And I'm not trying to take over asking questions, but I've got to get this out before I forget it, okay? I'm losing my mind as fast as I'm losing my hair. So, you said children are believers, and I agree with you. I think children are believers. They believe in anything you tell them. So you can tell them that Santa Claus is real, and they believe you. You can tell them that Allah is real, and they believe their parents. They believe whatever village it is that they're growing up in. So, and I have friends who have children who have an absence of theistic belief. So when you say that children are believers, there's proof out there. If you mean believers in your God, okay, there are plenty of children out there that would negate your claim. Okay, but now then, remind me about the other question here.
Well, I've got a lot of questions here. I have 2,468 questions. We want to also try to keep it moving and save time for everybody here. But and because everybody, some people might be taking notes and want to ask questions of follow-up, please do that. If you hear something that you don't like or you want to challenge later, you're going to have your opportunity. But here's another question for you: if you believe in God, Reverend Aaron Parrott just says he does, and you don't. But Reverend Parrott, does that also mean that you believe in some devil or Satan or evil perpetrated by that creature?
I believe in evil. I don't believe in the particular legends that almost every religion has to talk about evil and to talk about the origins of it, and or to personalize it in terms of the devil or this and that and the next thing. But I simply believe, as I guess maybe all of us would believe, from almost any point of view, that you can't look at human beings or look at history or look in your own life without believing that there is real evil of which we are capable.
How do you define evil?
That which is the opposite of compassion.
Earl, how do you define evil?
I define, whoops, okay. I don't look at evil as being something that you would pin on a person. You would say that's an evil person. I think you would say that evil is when harm is done from one person to another, or it could be perhaps, a lot of people think, okay, the earthquake in Haiti was evil. It's actually just a natural occurrence. It's not good or evil, it's neither. But to be succinct here, evil is harm that is done to another human being.
So it's a human thing that creates evil, is what you're suggesting.
Human behavior.
Human behavior. Is there a hope for healing human evil? What do you think that hope is?
Well, and let me clarify something here. The question is there a hope for human behavior?
Healing
human behavior. Healing human evil. Yeah, there's a hope for it. But when we talk about evil, we could get into this debate over the label of evil, but let's just face it. Let's get the elephant off the table here. We're talking about when harm is done to other people. When we talk about evil in the world, that's really what we mean. We don't want to get highly academic and theoretical on that particular label. Do I have hope that humans are going to act better? That we're going to eliminate evil behavior? Yeah, I do have hope, and I think we're evolving in that direction as we get more and more nations developed.
What gives you hope?
What gives me hope? When I hear people talk about liberty, when I hear people talk about democracy, when I hear people talk about coming up with constitutions and Bill of Rights and things like that, that gives me a lot of hope.
Harry, is there hope for healing human evil?
Yes, I think so. The religions of the world, it seems to me, would say that part of the healing will come through this spirit, this transcendent spirit, this divine spirit, the Spirit of God, that tugs at all of us. Certainly, there are rational reasons why one can have hope also. You look at history and some good things have happened. Some things have evolved in very positive ways. But I think I would not put my faith totally in reason, that somehow the more reasonable we become, the more we are going to be able to handle evil.
Is the Bible evidence of God?
Well, the Bible is the evidence of people and communities searching for God. And that's why you find in the Bible so many different things. You find the presence of evil in the Bible. You find good. You find persons who are compassionate toward others, people who are not. The Bible is full of stories leading in every different direction. But the Bible was put together and wrapped up in one volume because it is the record of one community over a long period of time, searching and trying to understand this transcendence, this divine, this God we're talking about.
So essentially, you're saying yes?
Yes.
Yes, the Bible is evidence of God. Earl, is the Bible evidence of God? If you don't believe in God, I guess you're going to say no.
Well, yes, I was going to say no and turn off my microphone. The Bible is evidence that there are people who have a belief in God, but it's not evidence that God exists, especially if you study it. And Harry even mentioned that. I didn't get a chance to answer it. He says he observes that a lot of non-religious people are obsessed with religion. I wouldn't call it obsessed. I would call it a genuine curiosity about why is it that there are so many people on the planet who are religious. So and I'm not. That's what happened to me when I was young. I wasn't religious, and everyone else was, and I felt like a misfit. I felt like that television show, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, where they have the island for misfit toys. Well, that's how I felt. I felt like I was on that island, and I wanted to learn why. So I started studying religion to find out what was so great about it that everybody was so obsessed with, because I feel like the religious people are the ones who are obsessed with religion. I just want to learn about it. I don't want to be obsessed with it. Okay, so the more I studied, the more I realized that there's more to this than a lot of religious people realize. And I've even seen this quoted in lots of newspapers where the Bible is the #1 bestseller, and it's also the #1 least read book on the planet. Okay, is that my answer?
You tell me. That sounds like your answer. So the Bible is not. Is nature the equivalent of God? Or would that be a similar superpower to you? Is there something in terms of nature that's a higher power for you?
That's a good question. Because I've had this conversation with lots of my religious friends. They could read a sacred text like the Bible, or they could go to a church service and they get goosebumps and they get this really good feeling inside, and they call it spiritual. I can go out hiking on the Florida Trail, or go kayaking, or be up in the mountains somewhere and see a beautiful landscape, and I feel like I get that same feeling. I just don't call it God. I don't call it religion or spirituality. I just call it an awe of nature. That's all.
What would cause you? Is there anything that you can think of that might cause you to believe in God?
A personal visit. A house call.
That would do it?
That would probably be the only thing that would do it for me. And I don't mean this facetiously. Anything I say out here tonight, I want everybody to know I say it with the utmost respect, because this is going to be a dialogue about building bridges, and I'm hoping that my friend of over 10 years is just trying to establish our differences here, because I don't want this to be a debate, because I love Harry. I've had him over for dinner, and he's a great guy, and so is his wife. So anyway.
Well, in terms of building bridges, we're spending a little time on God, and I think that's kind of an important thing when we're talking about theism versus atheism. I mean, it's contained in each of those definitions. But religion, Harry, do you see religion as something separate from a belief in God, or can you not separate the two?
Somewhat. As I said at the beginning, it seems to me that the world in which we live is a world in which we experience the reality of that which is transcendent, divine, God. I don't believe that nature is the same as that, but nature can be the vehicle by which we experience that. So, where are we going with that?
Yeah, where are we going with that?
All right, we're going to this next
Let's
question.
give him a hard time, Harry.
Let's ask him.
Why do we need religion?
We want you to answer that.
I'll answer that in the Q&A. I'll be happy to answer that in the Q&A. But I want to hear from you guys. Why do we need religion?
I want to recommend a book that some of you might like to look at called Spiritual Evolution by a Harvard professor named Valiant. And one of his points is that we are hardwired for some of the things that one would not expect to come through an evolutionary process. But his point is, it has come through an evolutionary process. We are hardwired for such things as love, and joy, and hope, and awe, the kind of thing that Earl was just talking about. And his further point is that even though we are hardwired and these things keep coming at us in the world in which we live, what we do in order to deal with those on the human plane in which we live is we build up systems that are called religion. That's where our religious systems come from. Our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, or whatever. And the good thing that those religious organizations can do, and do, when they are at their best, is they keep bringing into our consciousness through the liturgies and the activities of our religions, they keep bringing into our consciousness these great things like joy and love and hope and awe, so that they are in our consciousness, they are always with us, they motivate us to live by love and hope and joy and so forth and so forth. Now, our religious institutions can also do very bad things. They can become evil, as the good book by Kimball says, when religion becomes evil. Religion can become evil. But the great thing that religion does is to keep bringing into our consciousness the love, the joy, the hope, the awe that makes life wonderful and worth living.
Earl, what might the world look like without religion?
Well, I wanted to answer Harry's question. And I want to comment on something. You said that religion can become evil. Religion does not become evil, Harry. People do evil things. Behavior can be evil, but people cannot be evil. This building cannot be evil. Evil comes from human beings. So when you say religion is evil, do you really mean that? Or do you mean that the people inside of that particular religion, whether it be Islam, Christianity, Judaism, the evil comes from some of the participants within that religion?
Yes.
Okay.
So Earl, what do you see as the world being if there were no religion? Have you spent time thinking about that? If there were no religion at all, what might the world look like? Would there be a demonstrable difference that you can articulate?
You sound like John Lennon. I think the world will look a lot like it looks today. I think that people are still going to have quarrels. Perhaps there wouldn't be a lot of quarrels in the world. There wouldn't be a lot of Eric Rudolphs or Osama bin Ladens, all of these people committing crimes in the name of religion. You know, an interesting fact about committing crimes in the name of your worldview, really not a religion, but a worldview, is I don't see a lot of atheists doing this. Okay, there are examples in history of some leaders who said, well, I'm an atheist like Stalin, or there's examples there, but I don't see individual people out here on the streets doing this stuff, like you see where Eric Rudolph blows up an abortion clinic in Birmingham, Alabama, or you see Osama bin Laden in the name of Islam crashing planes into buildings. I don't want to say that the world would be better without religion. I'm not sure, because I feel like, based on my relationships with a lot of people who are religious, that they need their religion and there's no harm in it. And I could go on, but I know we are cut for
Well,
time.
Harry, would you spend any time thinking about that?
I appreciate you saying that. Not only is there no harm in it, but is there not a lot of good in it?
Okay, good question. Sometimes I wonder about the good, Harry. Yes, there's a lot of good. I had a conversation with a friend recently over the weekend. We were talking about contributions to Haiti by different organizations, different worldviews, the Christians, the Jews, the atheists, people that are giving money and resources to Haiti. And I thought, and I even said this to my friend, I said, I wonder how many people have taken the time to look into these organizations, like some of the religious organizations, who are going over to Haiti and doing this good thing that you say. Are they there for really good altruistic reasons, or are they there for a reason? And I'll go ahead and get to the punchline, and that is that I wouldn't want to give money or resources to a Christian organization that goes over to Haiti and provides medicine and clothing and stuff if their goal is to just set up camp there and then start doing what they've been doing in other countries and in other continents, like depriving people of birth control or contraception, depriving public school systems of the right to teach evolution and teach a good science curriculum, depriving women their rights to be full human beings and equal to men, things like that. We got on that tangent. So as far as does religion contribute a lot of good to society? If we go back in history and look, I'm questionable. I'm skeptical about it. But I'd have to say yes. Yes, religion has done some good things in this world.
Well, you just recited what I will agree with, that religion can do a lot of harm, but my point is that as you think about the average ordinary person, Christian, Buddhist, whatever, in terms of their ordinary, everyday living out of their religious faith and trying to be faithful about it, is it not much more an attitude of loving their neighbors, being compassionate toward others, responding when there are needs, than all these evil things that are easy to talk about?
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
you and I would agree about.
Yeah, it has, and thinking about those things has changed my mind and led me to step away from being a fundamentalist atheist. In the beginning of my life, I was judging Christianity through sound bites on TV of Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson and people like that. And I said, well, if that's Christianity, I don't want any part of it. And then as my activist life moved forward, I got to see that there were a lot of people in the world. I'll give you a good example, the Reverend Barry Lynn, the Executive Director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. That's where I really had my epiphany about 5 years ago that changed me into thinking, okay, we need to quit fighting with each other and figure out a way to build bridges, because we've got too many people like Barry Lynn who are out here in the trenches working to bring liberty to our country, to bring equal rights to our country, to make our nation a secular nation where religion can flourish, non-religion can flourish. So yeah, the people out in the streets are mostly benign. It's these leaders like the Robertsons. Has everybody heard what Pat Robertson said about the earthquake in Haiti?
I don't like the word benign, though. You're talking about the average ordinary religious person as being sort of harmless, as if they were neutral. What I'm saying is that although there are evils within any religious community, the overwhelming influence of religion, of most of the world's religion, is toward living a life of love and compassion and service.
Should we let Ken back in?
No.
Okay.
And you were talking about Barry Lynn. Now this leads me to say that my own attitude toward you, and indeed I thank you for inviting me to your home, and I must say that he is a great cook. And the salmon was delicious. And I wondered afterwards how many Baptist ministers Sue and Earl have entertained in their homes. And
you're the first.
When you talk about building bridges, what I thought to myself was, you took the first step. You invited me into your home. And I don't know that I've ever had a person invite me into their home who said at the beginning, I'm an atheist and I want to talk to you. But we had a good talk, right?
We had a great time.
Now what I'm saying is that my view of you is, and your community here, is that I don't particularly understand why you don't pick up the same signals about transcendence and God and the divine that I and my community pick up. You know, I don't quite understand that.
We're operating with Windows 7.
Earl, that means you crash a lot. I don't know that that's Windows 7
doesn't crash.
But that goes back to your point of being hardwired. you're suggesting is that Earl doesn't have the same hard wires. That
Well, I think he does, but I want to go beyond this debate. Now, you may want to get back to the debate, but I want to get on to your purpose for tonight, which was to build some bridges. How do you build bridges? Now, what I'm saying is you took the first step. And as far as I'm concerned, that's great. The next step is for you and I to get up here and to convince these folks, and maybe ourselves as well, that we can have a civic and a civilized dialogue about this. That we're not at each other's throats, that you respect me and I respect you. Now, the next thing about building a bridge is to realize that even though we have different worldviews, there are overlapping areas where, even though we continue to have different worldviews, we can work together. Now, you're talking about Barry Lynn and Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, where you and I are absolutely, I think, on the same page, is to realize that in America, the separation of church and state means, or was meant to mean, that people who have your point of view are fully respected, and people who have my point of view are fully respected, and neither of us is to dominate the other. One worldview is not to dominate in the country. I don't know where I'm going with this, except to say
Ken Hurley.
that that's a bridge.
Well,
That's a bridge.
I want to get more into the bridges, starting with this, though. I want to get into a little bit about separation of church and state, but I want to begin with the Declaration of Independence that suggests, and I want to see how compatible you guys are with this. Declaration of Independence suggests that we engage in the pursuit of happiness. So from each of your perspectives, please tell us your idea of happiness.
What do you think?
Oh, boy, Ken.
You know, we don't have to answer every question again.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right, I handed it over to him.
I thought this was an easy one. Wait till I get to the tough question.
Happiness is living my life where I'm not harmed by other people, where I'm free to explore what I want to do and become my own individual. How's that sound?
Parrott?
Okay, I think freedom in that way is overrated. And I don't think freedom, I think freedom like that can be vacuous if it's filled with nothing. My view of freedom, and I think the way most religions of the world would look at freedom in a general sense, is that there's a hole in your life. And when that hole is filled with spirit, transcendence, the reality of the divine, that is what gives your life happiness.
Okay, now, and more power to you on that. I have the same feelings, I just don't get them from the same operating system as you. And, you know, my life is not filled with a vacuum. I'm going to be cooking a lot of salmon before I die. Okay? But you made me think about something that happened to me a couple of years ago. I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago. I had a friend of mine who's a Christian, and one day we were having a really deep conversation like we're trying to have tonight, and she started crying, and I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Well, I really like you, Earl, but you're not going to go to heaven." And she was crying. She felt bad. She was living that. She felt like it was true, like it was really going to happen. And I looked at her and I said, "Well, then that's all the more reason for us to remain friends and stay in touch. We've got a limited amount of time, so you're only going to see me for a while." And the point here is that instead of me looking at her like I would have 10 or 12 years ago, and oh boy, I'm out of here, I just look at her and I try to feel compassion for her. I try to feel, and I want reciprocation. I want to. That's why we're here tonight, is to build these bridges and to get everybody in the room to go out and say, I love everybody as long as you don't hurt me. I don't care what you think. I love you. And that's the point here. Did I answer that question?
You did great. You're doing fantastic. You're doing well. Howard, do you want to add anything to that, or shall I got another question for you. Let's move on to separation of church and state. And a lot of people know that that phrase comes from a letter from Thomas Jefferson to Danbury Baptist Church, and the idea was to keep this church and state apart, that one won't infringe on the other. Is it true that you both agree that separation of church and state is real and has been elevated to a constitutional principle?
Well, I think that it's part of the legal tradition of our country. Now, that is not to say the bright line is easy to find or is clear to everybody. But I think it is clear in this country that in general terms, everybody should be free and is free to have their own religious point of view or non-religious point of view, whatever. And to the largest extent possible, the government should be neutral. And so long as the government is neutral, that ensures the freedom of everybody to have their own point of view. It is when the government begins to promote a particular point of view in any way that we better watch out. We better watch out.
Okay, I agree with Harry. I do agree with
Do you want to add anything?
Yes, I do want to add something to that. The separation of church and state, if the whole world had secular governance, this planet would be so much different. So yeah, I agree with Harry.
Well, one of the interesting things, though, is that in opposition to some countries, which, let's say France, at the time of the late 1780s when the United States was trying to put together its Constitution, even though we went in the direction of the separation of church and state, which I thank God that we did, the underlying idea was not particularly hostility toward religion, as if we wanted to kind of wipe out religion. One of the reasons we went in the direction of the separation of church and state is that the United States at that point was, or the colonies at that point, were kind of overrun by all kinds of religious points of view. And so the framers of our Constitution said, well, let religion have its play and let religious groups make their contribution to society and to our country, but let's try to make sure that no group dominates. Because that had been the pattern, of course, in the colonies, that each of the colonies, or at least 9 out of 12 of them, had their established churches, and they dominated, and they persecuted. So we didn't want that. In France, at virtually the same time, they were going also in the direction of establishing a secular government, but it was anti-religious. If the French could have had their way at that time, religions would have been wiped out, and the French would have set up their nation of reason, or whatever they call it, humanity of reason. Well, anyway, my point is that in the United States, separation of church and state does not mean hostility toward religion. Okay, go ahead.
Well, we're talking about building bridges,
Right.
and we're also now talking about the wall of separation of church and state. So we want to keep the church and the state separate, according to both of you gentlemen. But yet we want to build a bridge between atheism and theism. Should we build bridges between the church and the state?
I'll go first this time. Yes, we need to build bridges, but at the same time, we need to keep our nation secular.
Need a drawbridge.
That's a drawbridge.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what
He said a drawbridge.
a drawbridge.
Okay.
Well, Harry, what do you think about the wall? A lot of of people want to tear the wall down and make sure that they're not separate. A lot of people say this is a Christian nation.
You know, the people that I'm concerned about are those people that you're talking about there who have never forgiven the United States from putting into the First Amendment that whole idea of the separation of church and state. And so from that very moment when the Constitution was ratified, there have been attempts again and again and again, virtually every year, to write into our laws that we are a religious nation, that we have to be a religious nation. Because, let's face it, the human being finds it very difficult to get over the idea that every tribe has to have their own God, and that every nation has to have their own God who looks after them, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And so the United States, at its best, has thrown out that idea. And there are people like those who want to continually say that we are a Christian nation, who want to write that right back into our official documents, that we have our own God, and our own God is going to look after us, and so forth and so forth. I'm against it, and you're against it. And I think we need to understand our common ground and work together to make sure this doesn't happen.
Endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights is often interpreted as God-given rights. Where do our rights come from?
From each other. I think we give each other our rights.
Do you agree?
A pact or a covenant, we the people decide on this. Now, when those words were put in the Declaration of Independence,
Did you see our cups?
yes, I saw that. Yes.
In case anyone hasn't seen these cups, it says "One Nation Under Us." We the people.
My view of that is that Thomas Jefferson, on behalf of his committee, were putting together a political document. And we know, all of us know, that religion is powerful enough that politicians love to use it, right? And Thomas Jefferson, although he was a deist and not a religious person in the way that many people are today, he was not above or below using religious phrases to stir up the people. And he did that in the Declaration of Independence because, I mean, let's face it, that was a call to arms. And
Now, wait a minute, what's the call to arms? Is the fact that he didn't say endowed by Christ?
well, that he used that phrase, we are endowed by our Creator. I mean, I look upon this as a flowery and powerful phrase that he used in this document, which was a totally political document to motivate the people to get out there and take up arms.
Okay, well, I was thinking that Jefferson used endowed by our Creator as a way to let everybody know that he honored diversity. Okay, that to me is what was going on with endowed by our Creator.
By their Creator.
Okay, yeah.
Not our Creator, by their Creator. He actually excluded himself from the group he was talking about.
Where's that drawbridge?
No, he did. He said by their Creator. I don't know what, let them figure it out for themselves. That's the way I read it.
Okay, next question.
Well, if our rights are made up, as you suggest, a covenant, as you suggest, why should we respect them? Or maybe I should ask you, do you think we respect them enough?
I think we respect them because without them we'd have anarchy. Well, wait a minute. No, see, that's the old Earl talking. Okay, we respect them because we respect each other. And that document is all about us. So That is, to me, that's why I respect the document, because I respect everybody that believes in that document.
Reverend?
Well, I essentially agree with what Earl's saying here, that I think to the extent that we make covenants with each other, that we demand our rights, that we fight for our rights and finally get them, and so forth and so forth. If then we don't respect them, society begins to fall apart.
Now see, wait a minute, I just said that we'd have anarchy, and then I corrected myself. I just really don't think we would. I don't think that document, even though it's a binding document, I just don't think that the people in this room, if all of a sudden the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights went away, that everybody would go, yippee! It's time to go out and murder and just do all kinds of things and break every law we can. I don't think that would happen. I think the laws are there. Well, we're going to get into philosophical stuff, and you've got, what did you say, 2,000?
Well, what I want to do is I want to take another 5 minutes and then open it up to everybody, and that's what I'd like to do. And so if you have more thoughts on that, maybe during the Q&A. But I want to ask this question. Does the word marriage appear at all in the Bible?
The word marriage?
Right.
Yes. Yes, I would think
It does appear in the Bible. What is your opinion relative to GLBT issues and gay marriage today? And whether it should be codified in our secular laws or not codified in our secular laws because of biblical principles? How do you stand on that?
Well, you've used an interesting phrase there, biblical principles, and it's used very often.
And very loosely.
Very loosely, and what I said at the beginning was that you can find many, many things in the Bible, and you can find many, many principles in the Bible. Of course, the classic illustration of this is at the time of the Civil War, when both the North and the South were appealing to the Bible, some for freeing the slaves and some for keeping the slaves as slaves. What I'm moving up toward here is that you can find in the Bible the most horrible kinds of attitudes toward persons, let's say, who are homosexual. Or if you don't buy that that's exactly what the Bible says, you can certainly easily read that into it. Horrible attitudes. They're in the Bible. You can also find in the Bible the most loving and compassionate kind of attitudes. And even in the New Testament, you can find the idea that in Christ we are all one, and so forth and so forth. So on this issue, I'm talking within the church now, with the theological discussion that goes on within the church. You can find people appealing to the Bible on both sides of this issue in terms of GLBT issues.
Okay.
And that's typical of what you find in the Bible.
And if we're going to build bridges here, don't you think that people like you, people who I would term as liberal, progressive, religious people, wouldn't it be imperative for you to get out there and talk to your constituents and let them know that the Bible is wrong? Wait a minute, because you said there are things in the Bible that aren't so great, right? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if there are things in the Bible that are wrong, then why leave the elephant on the table? Why not get out there and say, look, this problem we're having where we have these laws in our culture that came from these so-called biblical principles don't work anymore. And we need to do something about it. We need to get on the bandwagon and stop being the Osama bin Ladens and the Pat Robertsons of the world. And we need to hold their feet to the fire and stop giving them any kind of credibility. And then these laws are going to change to more peaceful, freedom, liberty-giving, civil laws. I don't see why there's any reason why a man and a man shouldn't be married or a woman and a woman shouldn't be married. And the only reason that this country is where it's at right now is because we have religious people who are behind this. And we have a lot of religious people who are standing by silently, and this guilt of inaction is in your corner, I think.
Here again, you are...
And I love you.
You are looking... you
But not in the biblical sense.
That's right, I don't want to marry
He knew him.
You're just looking at this as an outsider. The real, all I can say is that the reality within the church is that there are people on both sides of this issue. Now, my friend here who's with us tonight, who attends a church here in Jacksonville, which welcomes homosexuals and ministers to them in every way, can maybe address this in the next session. You're saying if only religion would be on the right side of this issue, which is your side, of course.
No, it's their side. It's the people who are being denied their rights.
They would be all right. The reality is that we're caught in this country in a culture war. And there is no doubt that one sees that reflected in the church. But it is being addressed.
Slowly.
Sure.
Okay.
That's the way life works.
Okay, I'll give you that.
We don't want to take, we don't want to misconstrue 2 steps forward and 1 step back as forward progress. That still is forward progress. All right, are you ready to go for the best part of this evening? Is your questions and your comments? First of all, thank you very much.
All right, we're not